To find the area of a parallelogram, we simply use the equation area equals the base times the height. Now the reason I'm doing a video over this is because the base and the height, a lot of times students tend to confuse which one is which. For this problem, we have three numbers listed out. To identify the base and the height, we want to look at this 90-degree angle. So in other words, I want to look at this section right here. You'll see it as a little square where two lines meet, and one of the lines is usually dotted. So this 90-degree angle is what we're going to use to identify our base and our height. This other number, this 16 that's off to the left, even though that kind of looks like a height, we're not going to use that at all for this problem. So again, our area is equal to base times height. So we look for the 90-degree angle, and that tells us what our base is and what our height is. They're the two lines that make up this 90-degree angle. With that in mind, the area for this triangle will be our base, which in this case is this bottom value of 14, times the height of 15. This lesson does not allow you to use a calculator, so you do need to multiply the values. And if I do that, 4 times 5 will give me 20, 4 times 1 would give me 4, plus 2 is 6. So we get 60 when we multiply the four of these numbers. So then we put a 0 and we start with the 1. 1 times 5 gives me 5, and 1 times 1 gives me 1. We add these together to get my final answer of 210. So my area is equal to 210. And if we look at what's happening, we're really multiplying meters, 14 meters times 15 meters. Meters times meters gives us meters squared. So our final answer would be 210 meters squared. This problem wants us to find the area of another parallelogram. If we go back to our formula, our area for a parallelogram is equal to the base times the height. So the first thing I need to do is identify the 90-degree angle in this problem, and that is right here. The two lines that make up this 90-degree angle end up being this line here and this line, or in our case 15 inches and 11 inches. So those are the two numbers that we're going to be focused on. We can ignore the 17 inches. We don't need to use it at all. So our formula ends up being area equals our base, which in this case the base is the number that's on the perimeter, somewhere on the perimeter of the parallelogram. In other words, it's one of the sides of the parallelogram. So we're using 11 as our base, and we're multiplying it by the height, which is this dotted line of 15. We don't have a calculator, so we do need to work this out by hand. And 11 times 15, we can take 1 and multiply it by 5. That gives me 5. 1 times 1 is 1. When we move on to this one, we put a 0 and then we multiply it out. 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 1 is 1. We add these together to get our final answer of 165. So my final answer is that the area is equal to 165 inches squared, because again, we're really taking inches, 11 inches, and multiplying by 15 inches. Inches times inches ends up giving us this inches squared in our final answer. This problem asks us to find the area of a parallelogram. It looks a bit different than the others just because we have this extra triangle off to the right. But all this triangle is doing is it's specifying the height for the figure. Instead of writing the 10 somewhere in here, they just end up writing it off to the side. So like the other problems, we're going to identify the 90-degree angle, which is down here. And that'll tell us what our base and our height is. Now in this case, it almost only specifies the height, but the base would be this section down here. We don't have the number for the actual bottom of the parallelogram, but because it's a parallelogram, the opposite side will end up being exactly the same length as the bottom side. So in this case, our base and our height is going to be 14 and 10. This 13 we don't need to worry about at all. So our formula is area equals the base, which in this case would be our 14, times the height, which would be 10. We multiply 14 times 10, we end up getting 140. So my final answer is that my area is equal to 140, not just feet, but feet squared, because we're taking feet and multiplying it by feet. This problem wants us to find the area of this parallelogram. So we need to identify the 90-degree angle before we can do anything. That 90-degree angle is down here. So it's made out of this dotted line and this other line at the bottom. We have the height. The height is 8. But now we need to identify the length of the bottom segment of this parallelogram. And that would be exactly the same as this top segment. So our base is actually a 13. So we have our formula of area equals the base times the height, and in this case it's 13 yards times 8 yards. If we multiply 13 times 8, we can write it off to the side since we don't have a calculator. 8 times 3 is 24. 8 times 1 is 8, plus 2 would give us 10. So we get a final answer of area is equal to 104 yards squared, because we're dealing with area. And really, we're dealing with yards times yards. And yards times yards is yards squared.